You ever have one of those days where you flip through the channels or scroll through social media and you wonder if everybody's living in the same country that you are? On one channel, the president is a fearless hero, saving America from socialist doom. On another, he's a wannabe dictator, setting the Constitution on fire and toasting marshmallows over the ashes. One network tells you crime is at historic lows. Another says we're living through the purge. It's like we've all been handed different scripts for the same show, and we're arguing about the plot while the set is literally on fire. But here's the thing. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when the news at least tried to give you both sides, when you could watch one broadcast and walk away feeling like you had a pretty good grasp of what was going on in the world. And that's not nostalgia talking. That was actually a rule. It was called the Fairness Doctrine. And when it died, it took something with it. Our shared sense of reality. Hello, and welcome to another supplemental installment of Back Porch Files from your neighbor on the left, the podcast about liberal politics, human decency, and life on the blue side of America's ideological divide. Today we're taking a dive into a piece of broadcast history that shaped the way Americans get their news, and, in its demise, shaped why we're so divided today. We're talking about the Fairness Doctrine. What it was, why it existed, why it got repealed, and how its death paved the way for today's media echo chambers. We'll also ask the big question: could bringing it back help us fix this mess? Or is that just wishful thinking in an age of TikTok and Truth Social and whatever Elon is doing over on X this week? So let's start with the basics. What the heck was the Fairness Doctrine? Back in 1949, the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, said, "Hey, the airwaves belong to the public. If you want to use them to broadcast radio or TV, you have a responsibility to serve the public interest." So they came up with a rule. If you were a broadcaster, you had to cover important public issues, and if those issues were controversial, you had to give airtime to different sides of the argument. Now think about that for a second. Imagine if every cable news segment today had to stop halfway through and bring on someone with the opposite point of view. Imagine if Fox News had to immediately follow a Sean Hannity-style rant with Rachel Maddow calmly explaining why Sean was full of, well, or vice versa. That was the idea. It wasn't perfect, but it meant that when Americans tuned into the news, they weren't just getting one political narrative. They were getting a much fuller picture. Now, fast forward to the 1980s. President Ronald Reagan was in the White House, and deregulation was the name of the game. The FCC looked at the Fairness Doctrine and said, you know what? This thing might actually be making broadcasters avoid controversial topics altogether, because they don't want the hassles of finding someone to present the other side. So maybe we should just get rid of it. And they did. In 1987, they did just that. Poof, gone. Congress actually tried to bring it back, but Reagan vetoed it. And George H.W. Bush was against reinstating it too. What happened next was basically a media gold rush, especially on AM radio. Suddenly, hosts could say whatever they wanted, as opinionated as they wanted, without having to balance it. Enter Rush Limbaugh, the man who turned talk radio into a political juggernaut. Whether you loved him or hated him, Limbaugh changed the game. He turned political commentary into entertainment, with catchphrases, parodies, and a loyal following. And because there was no more Fairness Doctrine, there was no obligation to give a liberal host equal time to respond. This, of course, is where things start to snowball. With talk radio booming, we got an audience primed for something even bigger, Fox News. When it launched in 1996, it promised to be fair and balanced. Spoiler alert, it was not. But it didn't have to be, because there was no law saying it had to be. And as cable news exploded, we started living in different realities. On the right, you had Rush, and Hannity, and O'Reilly telling you the left was destroying America. On the left, you eventually got MSNBC firing back. And in the middle, CNN trying to play it straight, but slowly drifting into its own brand of drama because outrage gets ratings. Then comes social media, which said, oh, you like hearing things that make you angry? Great. Here's an algorithm that will give you more of just that. Now we're in a place where people can curate their own entire information universe. If you only want news that confirms what you already believe, congratulations, you can do it 24/7. And here's the kicker. When everyone's living in their own reality, agreeing on basic facts becomes nearly impossible. You say climate change is real. Someone else says that's fake news. You say the election was valid. And they say you're brainwashed. And on and on and on it goes. It's exhausting. So, would bringing back the Fairness Doctrine fix this? Some media critics say yes, at least partially. If networks had to give time to opposing views, maybe we'd have less disinformation. Maybe the public would see a fuller picture instead of one-sided spin. But here's the problem. It's 2025, not 1949. Back then, we had 3 networks and a handful of radio stations. Now we have cable, podcasts, YouTube, TikTok, streaming, millions of voices competing for attention. How would you ever enforce a fairness doctrine in that environment? And even if you could, would it actually work? Or would it just create more both sidesism, like giving equal airtime to scientists and flat earthers? So if we can't bring back the Fairness Doctrine, what is the alternative? Well, for starters, media literacy. Teaching people, including ourselves, how to spot spin, check sources, and separate facts from outrage bait. Supporting good journalism. And yes, that sometimes means paying for it, even if it's just a digital subscription to your own local paper. And maybe the biggest thing, talk to people. Don't yell at them. Don't dunk on them on social media. Try to have real conversations where you actually listen, even if it's just to say, hey, I see where you're coming from, but here's what I've read. The death of the Fairness Doctrine didn't kill truth, but it sure made it harder to find. We live in a world where outrage is profitable and nuance does not trend. But we still have choices. We can choose to seek out facts instead of just vibes. We could choose to be curious instead of merely angry. And maybe, just maybe, we could choose to turn down the noise long enough to hear each other again. Because at the end of the day, we may be living in different realities, but we're still living in the same country. And that means we really should figure out how to share the same story again. Alright, that's it. Short rant this week for Back Porch Files, but an important one, I think. One that we've all thought about whether we realized the history of it or not. I'd like to thank everyone who took the time to download this supplemental episode of Back Porch Files, and I'd love to hear from you. As always, I keep saying this, go to one of our social media platforms. You can find the links for those on the Linktree page, and the address for the Linktree page is in the podcast description. We'll have another full episode of Your Neighbor on the Left coming out on Tuesday. So until then, pay attention, check your sources, have conversations, and as always, have the week you voted for.